I would like to thank the Kennedy Presidential Library, the Kennedy family, and the Vice President for the honor of speaking with you today on the 50th anniversary of President John F. Kennedy's remarkable call to action during his speech before the joint session of Congress on May 25th, 1961. This speech led to America's commitment to the moon race and ultimately established our leadership in space, thus opening the space frontier for all humankind. It was a bold and courageous call by the new president, who had been in office for little more than 4 months, at a time when America was clearly behind in space. A race that the president would later declare, "We fully intend to win." As we reflect back on this very special period in our history, it is important to appreciate the historical contents of this momentous and highly public declaration. I remember that period well. The challenges and the perceived threat to our national security at the time were very serious indeed. Just 8 years earlier, I was flying F-86 fighter jets in combat missions over Korea, a long and costly conflict of great national sacrifice that haunts us yet today. Just 3 years earlier, as President Eisenhower called for the establishment of the National Aeronautics and Space Administration in direct response to the Soviet Union's launch of a man-made satellite Sputnik, I was flying F-100 Super Sabre jets armed with nuclear weapons in the European theater as a deterrent to a potential preemptive nuclear threat on our country. Even as President Kennedy called for a national commitment to the lunar landing program, we faced an increasing threat to our security from the emerging partnership between the Soviet Union and Cuba within our own hemisphere. We were alarmed as the Soviets established a substantial lead in the development of heavy lift launch capabilities that, if used for peaceful purposes, would open up the possibility of human space flight, and if used for ill purpose, might lead to the destruction of the world as we knew it, a correspondence that the president understood all too well. And just 6 weeks prior to President Kennedy's speech that we are celebrating today, cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin became the first human in space, and concurrently the first human to orbit our Earth from space. An extremely impressive accomplishment. The Soviets would go on to accomplish many additional firsts in space: the first spacewalk, or EVA, the first woman in space, etc. NASA would follow Yuri's flight 23 days later with Alan Shepard's flight on May 5th, 1961. Certainly a worthy accomplishment, but it is important to recall that Alan's was a suborbital flight, not an orbital flight like Yuri's, which required much more powerful rockets, an indication of the greater launch capacity of the Soviet system. It would not be until John Glenn's historic flight on February 20th, 1962, more than 10 months after Yuri Gagarin's, that we would achieve our first orbital flight. Make no mistake, America was clearly behind in space. And our young president understood this and fully appreciated the serious implications this represented to our nation as he called us to action with his memorable declaration. I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the earth. He also recognized the enormity of this challenge, as well as the commitment required to achieve it. As he commented, "No single space project in this period will be more impressive to mankind or more important for the long-range exploration of space, and none will be so difficult or expensive to accomplish." He also noted, This decision demands a major national commitment of scientific and technical manpower, material, and facilities, and the possibility of their diversion from other important activities where they are already thinly spread. Yet President Kennedy's courageous leadership was clear and unwavering, stating with absolute eloquence a clear goal, destination, and schedule, while calling for a commitment to marshal the best that our country could muster to pursue the goal. He knew it could only be reached if every scientist, engineer, every serviceman, every technician, contractor, and civil servant gives his personal pledge that this nation will move forward with the full speed of freedom and the exciting adventure of space. And he did so in full disclosure for all to witness, without the cloak of secrecy, as he declared, "We take an additional risk by making it in full view of the world." In this way, he provided an opportunity for the world to clearly understand our goals, witness our commitment to it, experience our achievement, and share in our inevitable tragedies. As an aside, I would note that the magnitude and clarity of these goals cannot be overemphasized. Unfortunately, in the absence of a comparable defining goal for our space program since that time, along with the requisite commitment to it, has hindered our efforts in space. It is essential that we correct this by establishing a bipartisan commitment to an enduring goal that will inspire our nation, build upon the basis for our continued international leadership in space, and provide focus to the people who will be entrusted to carry it out. When our beloved president would later be taken from us on that tragic day, November 22nd, 1963, after just 34 months in office, our national determination to meet the challenging goals he had asked of us was that much greater. Even in the face of the tragedy of the Apollo 1 fire on January 27th, 1969, when we lost Gus Grissom, Roger Chaffee, and my West Point trackmate and friend, Ed White, it served to further strengthen our resolve. And our resolve produced a commitment that would honor our president and our fellow astronauts and ultimately culminate in our successful Apollo 11 mission just 2.5 years later, on July 20th, 1969, when Neil and I first stepped onto the surface of the moon at Tranquility Base, achieving the dream for all mankind. Standing on the shores of a new, barren, magnificent, yet desolate, distant orb, we viewed our own precious, small Earth from a whole new perspective. Everything we knew and loved lay suspended overhead in a small, fragile, bright blue sphere surrounded in the blackness of the infinite reaches of space. This was a transformative experience of far greater importance than winning the space race to the moon. And, I might add, one that validated the courage and leadership and confidence that President Kennedy demonstrated and demanded for our nation 50 years ago today. In fact, the President himself saw this great new American enterprise of our nation taking a clear leading role in space achievement as an endeavor far more important than merely a race, perhaps holding a key to our future on Earth, noting that we go into space because whatever mankind must undertake, free men must fully share. As I now reflect upon that magical moment, Two rather remarkable things stand out in my mind that we had not anticipated when we first undertook this challenge. First, because we executed our mission in a manner that fully engaged people from all over the world, America's success was viewed as a success for all humankind. Headlines across the globe declared, "We did it." Second, in responding to President Kennedy's call to undertake this mission to another world, we discovered our own precious planet Earth. We saw it at once as both a very special cradle of life as we know it, and yet we also saw it connected to the vastness of the universe in which it resides. Questions about the limits of our fragile planet to sustain us, about the possible uniqueness or potential abundance of life in the universe, and the seemingly infinite opportunities that lay beyond the bounds of Earth, continue to inspire us and guide our continued quest for research and understanding. My own personal journey with Apollo began with my graduate studies at MIT, where I earned my doctorate of science in astronautics. As a fighter pilot, the notion of rendezvous with another object in flight was simply a matter of successfully conducting the mission to intercept, engage, and destroy the threat. As we became wiser about how to conduct the mission to the moon, it became obvious that lunar orbit rendezvous would be essential to accomplish this mission. The many mission trades that NASA conducted and the analysis of the various generalized versus special purpose design concepts quickly demonstrated that employing specialized vehicles with lunar orbit rendezvous, LOR, provided our best solution to meeting these extremely challenging requirements within the schedule articulated by the President. LOR consists of launching 3 spacecraft, a mothership or command module, a service module, and a small lunar lander into Earth orbit on top of a single 3-stage rocket. Once in Earth orbit, the last stage of the rocket fires and boosts the Apollo spacecraft and crew on a trajectory to the moon. Once in lunar orbit, 2 out of the 3 astronauts don their spacesuits, climb into the Lunar Excursion Module, LEM, detach from the mothership, and land on the moon. To get home, the LEM rockets back up and docks with the command module, and the 3 astronauts returned to Earth, if all went as planned. In other concepts, such as direct descent, would have required the development of a much more powerful launch vehicle than the Saturn V, or Earth orbit rendezvous, which would have required the use of multiple launch vehicles, 2 Saturn Vs, to achieve the same goal, which would have been more costly and would have compromised the goal of achieving the mission within a decade. Intrigued by this understanding, I saw an opportunity to personally contribute to the space program by focusing my MIT thesis on the problem of manned space rendezvous. Ultimately, NASA saw value in this work of mine, and I was admitted to the astronaut program, the first Doctor of Science and non-test pilot candidate to be so honored. The Apollo program was a tremendous and challenging effort made possible by the dedication and total commitment of the very best our country could offer. And despite the obvious dangers associated with its undertaking, our complete and total focus was on accomplishing the mission, which we were blessed to achieve in less than 8 years and 2 months following the President's speech. A truly remarkable achievement, which we also honor this evening in his behalf. As we reflect upon this accomplishment, I would call for the recognition of the 24 astronauts who conducted the Apollo missions reaching the moon to receive the recognition they so richly deserve, designating them as lunar ambassadors. And for the lunar astronauts who also served in the military during this period, I would recommend elevating their rank to the equivalent of a 2-star general. Much has been written about Apollo 11, the mission itself. Some of the personal challenges I faced as I struggled with my own demons following Apollo, and my subsequent rededication and personal commitment to contribute my energies to the furtherance of human space exploration. So I would like to briefly talk about now a few of the important outcomes resulting from Apollo and try to anticipate the way forward in space, a future legacy to the President who inspired us to dare to explore this new frontier. In addition to reaffirming America as a leader in space, Apollo inspired a new generation with renewed interest in the pursuit of scientific and engineering careers. This in turn led to the revolution in computer processing, software, and silicon disks, and to the development of a technological foundation that would help us gain an important understanding about the sustainability of our Earth system, substantially improve the quality of life for people on Earth, establish the economic base that has sustained our economy and well-being for decades, and help answer some of the most important, profound scientific questions in the history of mankind. Although born of competition, President Kennedy saw an important opportunity for collaboration in space. Despite the ongoing Cold War and our competing interests in the conflict in Vietnam, we would eventually pursue a partnership with the Soviet Union, resulting in the joint Apollo-Soyuz test project in July 1975, and our extensive, long-term collaboration in space life sciences that keeps our astronauts and cosmonauts safe in space. Indeed, President Kennedy's vision of collaboration in space has become the new norm. The Russians are now critical partners in the development of the world's most cooperative effort, the International Space Station, with participation by 16 nations who will exploit its capabilities in the coming decade to conduct science, test technology, and prepare for exploration beyond low Earth orbit. Nearly 2/3 of NASA's science missions engage some level of international involvement, and many other space agencies also involve NASA and other international participants in their missions. Space is truly now an international endeavor. I might also observe that in addition to his call for a program to land on the moon, President Kennedy's speech also called for 3 other important goals: the acceleration of the use of space satellites for worldwide communication, the development of a new system for worldwide weather observations, and the accelerated development of a rover nuclear rocket, providing a means for even more exciting and ambitious exploration of space, perhaps beyond the moon, perhaps to the very end of the solar system itself. 3 of these goals, the moon landing, the communication satellites, and an extensive weather satellite system, have been fully realized, while the latter goal, the development of a new rocket launcher whose purpose was to explore the deepest reaches of our solar system, has yet to be accomplished. Of course, the purpose of this new rocket was a means to an end. The goal was the exploration of deep space, far beyond the Earth-Moon system. Therefore, on the 50th anniversary of the event we honor today, this unmet, unfulfilled goal should be the focus of our efforts in the coming decades. And it should be pursued with the same clarity of purpose, national leadership, dedication to achieving it, and commitment to seeing it through. There are those who will rightly caution that we have many other challenges that require our attention in the near term. And while this is true, it is also true that our focus on the challenges of the present should not deter our commitment to a larger future goal that inevitably will have an even more profound impact on humankind than Apollo had on our generation. It is a question of balance and the essential requirement to invest in our future with the same conviction that President Kennedy made during his challenging era. To do less would be to surrender the future of space to others who will undoubtedly assume this worthy challenge as we fall behind. History is replete with lessons of great nations of exploration and discovery that lost their prominence to other nations who persevered as they retreated in the face of other immediate challenges of their time. America is the natural leader for space. Thanks to the vision and leadership of the President we honor today. And as my dear friend and colleague Norm Augustine has remarked, America deserves a space program worthy of a great nation. The way forward. As was the case with President Kennedy's call to this nation 50 years ago, courageous leadership is needed to set a clear goal, destination, and schedule, and to provide the required commitment to execute them. A founding principle to frame our goal should begin with a declaration of our commitment to continued American leadership in space and ultimately lead to the expansion of humankind into the cosmos. I believe that the specific goal we should undertake in support of this founding principle should be the establishment of permanent human presence on the surface of Mars by the year 2035. We should also establish a pathway of progressive missions that will lead to this goal, develop the means to achieve it, and ensure that our space efforts in the coming 2.5 decades are aligned to accomplish it. While I, like many others, would prefer to see a more accelerated space, this schedule would provide roughly 3 times the amount of time it took us to accomplish the first lunar landing, providing adequate time to develop the technologies, capabilities, and supporting systems and infrastructure to do it safely and affordably, while we accomplish other important objectives along the way. Recalling that it took approximately 66 years from the Wright brothers' first powered flight in 1903 to realize our first landing on the moon in 1969, the recommended goal of humans on Mars by 2035 would occur approximately 66 years following our Apollo 11 landing. In recognition that this great endeavor would benefit all humankind, participation in this undertaking should be open to all nations who choose to pursue it. America can and should be a leader in this effort, welcoming all others in the spirit of mutual trust and respect as we marshal our best collective efforts in pursuit of this worthy goal. We should establish a flexible path and utilize the capabilities we develop for our longer-term goal to enable an expanding reach beyond low Earth orbit, the Earth-Moon system, and special orbital locations with stable orbits called Lagrange points for larger space science observatories that will peer back in time to the very origins of the universe. We will also be able to conduct missions to asteroids and near-Earth crossing objects that may one day pose a threat to Earth, perhaps exploiting their resources to sustain our presence in space as we seek a better scientific understanding of their origins and the history of our solar system, while also developing the ability to counter their potential threat to Earth. I should note that the term flexible path does not obviate the need for a strong commitment to a specific destination. Rather, it would afford opportunities to conduct other important exploration objectives as we progress toward this goal. In the longer term, we should explore the moons of Mars, which would serve as natural space stations in orbit around Mars, affording astronauts the ability to robotically control the infrastructure on the surface of Mars to sustain future exploration and the settlements, while also conducting a wide range of scientific investigations and technology demonstrations without the long time delay inherent in operating robots from Earth. With regards to the moon, we should not re-engage in a second moon race. We won that race more than 40 years ago, and there is no compelling reason nor immediate national threat that would suggest that we should forego our longer-term goal of permanent human presence on Mars by 2035 by diverting the resources needed to accomplish this goal. This is not to suggest that there are not other potentially valuable activities that we might pursue as a partner and collaborator with our international partners and the private sector, should there be a strong and compelling interest in the moon. Certainly, many of the capabilities we will develop in pursuit of our longer-term goal would benefit such a collaboration. But the moon should not be pursued as a competitive endeavor, nor should it become a multi-decade deferment of our broader goal. Should the international community and the commercial sector wish to commit to a near-term goal of exploiting the Earth-Moon system for other compelling reasons, our role might be to assist as a leader and collaborator to help facilitate this goal. I've been working with a small group of engineers and scientists that have been developing such a concept, which hosted a workshop on this topic a few weeks ago at NASA Ames. The approach would be to establish a partnership between international space agencies and commercial entities interested in pursuing the moon, which would lead to the development of an international lunar research park. To exploit this opportunity through the auspices of an international lunar research corporation or authority. The effort would be pursued through a phased development of terrestrial-based telerobotic demonstrations to validate the emplacement of infrastructure and capabilities for human exploration in space, leading to the establishment and demonstration of a similar capability on the moon in preparation for human activity there. It would also validate a process we might employ from the moons of Mars to facilitate the development of needed capabilities on the surface of Mars in support of future human missions and settlements. Next steps. Having established a clear goal, a destination, and a schedule, and defined a flexible path that would phase the development of our capabilities while adding to our body of knowledge along the way, we should use this information to phase the work we will undertake in the coming decades. In the very near term, we should continue to help the emerging commercial launch vehicle companies mature their capabilities so they can assume the role of providing access to low Earth orbit and maintain the International Space Station. It is quite appropriate that we look to commercial providers for routine access to space, as NASA initiates the development of capabilities to meet its unique future mission requirements, which are in excess of the commercial marketplace needs. Having learned the difficult lessons from the past about the high costs of access to space, we should encourage these providers to develop reusable, affordable, and sustainable systems with the lowest possible life cycle costs to ensure that our costs to purchase these services will not impede our ability to invest the needed resources for longer-term space exploration goals. For example, we should encourage the use of winged Earth-to-orbit reusable vehicles, which would return to runways near their launch site so they can be efficiently serviced for subsequent launch and return. I might also note that while I strongly support the transition to the commercial sector for these services, I too share the concern that the gap created by the termination of the Space Shuttle program before these new systems become fully operational poses a risk to our ability to maintain the International Space Station. As I have previously stated, I would have preferred that we continue to operate the Space Shuttle, albeit at a reduced flight rate, until we have demonstrated a capability online to replace it to avoid the gap entirely. As we learned from the transition from Apollo to Space Shuttle, a gap in access to space is very disruptive to both human spaceflight and to our space science missions. Unfortunately, it was decided that we could not afford to maintain the Space Shuttle while we concurrently supported the development of commercial efforts and future NASA launch capabilities. As a result, we will be reliant upon our international partners to help us weather this gap as the commercial systems are matured. It is important that we work closely with our international partners to assure that we are able to maintain the International Space Station, a critical asset to our long-term exploration of space. The coming decade should be dedicated to preparing or launching our new space goals as we and our international partners continue to exploit the International Space Station's unique capabilities to validate the technologies, develop systems and capabilities required for humans to safely explore deep space. In collaboration with our international partners, we should open the participation in the International Space Station to other nations who wish to collaborate in this work, paving the way for their involvement and participation in the international collaboration in space. At the same time, we should invest in the critical technologies and begin the development of future capabilities that will be required to develop the exploration systems to establish permanent presence in space beyond low Earth orbit. In the intermediate term, as NASA begins the definition and future development of more capable, advanced space transportations to enable missions beyond low Earth orbit, we should keep in mind the difficult lessons from both Apollo and the Space Shuttle, and not replicate or reuse systems that have proven to be too costly to sustain, simply to avoid the development of new, more cost-effective systems and approaches which may prove to be more affordable and sustainable in the long term. As we did for Apollo, we should develop specialized vehicles with optimized capabilities to meet their operational requirements. We should also develop effective architectures to make our future missions affordable and sustainable. We should employ innovative approaches, such as utilizing special orbiting cyclers, a concept I conceived several decades ago that would serve as space stations that would cycle between Earth and Mars orbits, providing a reusable system to transport significant members of future explorers and colonists to Mars and its two moons, Phobos and Deimos, leading to the permanent settlement of Mars in 2035, where we will learn about the undiscovered mysteries of our once twin planet, and from that knowledge gain an important understanding about the eventual fate of our planet Earth as we begin a new journey of discovery to realize a future destiny for humankind on Mars and beyond. In undertaking this great challenge, we will be honoring President John F. Kennedy's bold leadership, fulfilling the one remaining goal he called upon us to undertake as we embrace a future that will sustain us on Earth while expanding human presence into a limitless future in space. A future that will be possible only with the courageous and determined leadership he so exemplified 50 years ago today.